Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the stars. His ship was small compared to the giant vessels that belonged to other alien races. The humans had been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years now, but they were still treated like children who had accidentally found their way into adult conversation. Jake was 35 years old and had been commanding ships for 10 years. He had short brown hair and tired green eyes that had seen too many disappointments. His uniform was clean but old, patched in places where the fabric had worn thin. The human fleet only had 3 ships allowed to travel beyond Earth's solar system, and the New Horizon was the smallest of them all. "Captain, we're getting close to the Kepler 7 station," said Lisa Park from her position at the navigation controls. Lisa was 28 and had been with Jake's crew for 3 years. She was good with numbers and had a way of finding paths through space that others missed. Her black hair was always tied back in a neat ponytail, and she never complained about the boring missions they were given. "Good. Let's hope they have better food than last time," said Ben Carter from the engineering station. Ben was the oldest member of the crew at 42. He had gray hair and hands that were always dirty from fixing things, so he could make their old ship work with spare parts and hope when it should have fallen apart years ago. Ben had worked on ships since he was 18 and knew every sound the New Horizon made. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her medical station and smiled. "The food can't get worse than those green cubes they served us on Titan Station." Amy was 30 and had joined the crew because she wanted to see the galaxy. She had learned to speak 5 different alien languages and could treat injuries from species humans had never heard of before joining the council. Her brown eyes were always kind, even when she was tired. Tony Blake laughed from his communication station. "At least the green cubes didn't try to escape from the plate." Tony was the youngest crew member at 24. He had blonde hair and was always making jokes, even when things were bad. He could talk to any alien species and somehow make them understand what he meant, even when the translation computers failed. Jake smiled at his crew. They were good people who deserved better than hauling supplies and mining asteroids while the important aliens handled real business. The Galactic Council had 5 major species that ran everything. Xanthari were tall and thin, with large heads full of brains that could solve any problem. The Gorvak were huge and strong, with thick skin and muscles that could crush metal. The Velkrin built machines that seemed like magic to humans. The Nordani could read minds and move things without touching them. The Zelian could talk anyone into anything and always knew what others were thinking before they said it. Then there were humans. Humans were not the smartest or the strongest or the most advanced. They were not psychic, and they were not great at talking people into things. Humans were average at everything, and in a galaxy full of specialists, being average made them useless. "Captain, we're being contacted by the station," Tony said, pressing buttons on his console. "They want to know if we're carrying the medical supplies they requested." "Tell them yes, and ask where they want us to dock," Jake replied. This was their life now. Flying from station to station, carrying things that other species were too important to bother with. The Xanthari had ships that could carry 100 times more cargo, but they were busy with important council business. The Gorvak could move heavy equipment that humans couldn't even lift, but they had better things to do. So humans got the small jobs, the boring jobs, the jobs that nobody else wanted. The New Horizon docked at Kepler 7 station without any problems. The station was built by the Velkrin and looked like a giant metal flower floating in space. Walls were covered with lights that pulsed in patterns that meant something to the Velkrin, but looked pretty to humans. The docking bay was clean and efficient, with mechanical arms that grabbed their ship and pulled it into place. "All right, let's get this cargo unloaded," Jake said, standing up from his captain's chair. "Amy, you're with me?" "Ben, check the ship's systems while we're docked." "Lisa, plot our course to the next station." "Tony, monitor communications and let me know if anything important happens." Jake and Amy walked through the station's corridors toward the cargo area. The station was busy with aliens from different species. Xanthari moved quickly with their long legs, their big eyes focused on data tablets they carried everywhere. Gorvak stomped past with heavy footsteps, their thick arms carrying equipment that would take 3 humans to lift. Velkron floated by, on personal flying devices, surrounded by small robots that did everything for them. None of them looked at the humans. To them, Jake and Amy were invisible, just part of the background like the cleaning robots or the air recycling systems. They reached the cargo bay, where station manager Kelvin was waiting. Kelvin was a Xelian, which meant he looked almost human except for his blue skin and the fact that his eyes changed color when he was thinking hard. Xelians were good at managing things because they could understand what everyone wanted before they asked for it. "Ah, the human supply ship," Kelvin said in perfect English. His voice was smooth and friendly, but Jake could tell he was not really interested in them. "Do you have the medical supplies for our clinic?" "Right here," Amy said, checking her tablet. 50 cases of basic medical equipment, 20 cases of human-compatible medicines, and 10 cases of universal antibiotics. Good, Kelvin said, his eyes turning green as he thought about something else. "Just leave them over there. My staff will handle the rest." As they were unloading the medical supplies, Jake heard loud voices coming from the station's main meeting room. Through the open door, he could see Ambassador Helen Wright, one of the few humans who worked directly with the Galactic Council. She was talking to a Xenthari who was much taller than her, with skin like gray leather and eyes like black stones. "The mining rights to the Kepler 442 system should be available to all Council species," Helen was saying. She was 50 years old and had been fighting for human rights in the Council for 20 years. Her gray hair was always perfect, and she wore expensive clothes, but Jake could see the frustration in her blue eyes. "Counselor Vexthal," the Xenthari replied in a voice that sounded like he was bored. "Your species has had council membership for 50 years. In that time, you have contributed very little to galactic civilization. The Kepler 442 system contains rare minerals that require advanced extraction techniques. Techniques that humans do not possess." "Oh, we could learn," Helen said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We could work with other species, share the profits." Us. Bextel's black eyes looked down at her like she was a child asking for candy. "Ambassador, right? Your species should be grateful for the territory you have been given. The fact that humans are allowed in civilized space at all is a generous gift from the Council. Do not ask for more than you deserve." Jake felt his hands close into fists. He had heard this kind of talk before, but it never got easier. Amy put her hand on his arm and shook her head. Getting angry would not help anything. It would just prove to the aliens that humans were emotional and unstable. "You're right, Counselor," Helen said finally. "Humans are grateful for what we have been given." Bextal nodded like a teacher who had just corrected a slow student. "I am glad you understand. Now, if you will excuse me, I have important matters to attend to." Jake and Amy finished unloading the cargo in silence. As they walked back to their ship, Jake could not stop thinking about what he had heard. 50 years in the Galactic Council, and humans were still treated like pets who had learned a clever trick. They were back on the New Horizon when Tony's voice came over the communication system. "Captain, I'm picking up an emergency signal. It's coming from the mining colony on Titan 4. Jake rushed to the bridge where Tony was working at a station with a worried look on his face. "What kind of emergency?" "It's bad, Captain," Tony said, reading the message on his screen. "Massive solar storm hit the system 6 hours ago. All technology on the planet is down. They've got 10,000 colonists from different species trapped on the surface, and their protective shields are failing. They're asking for immediate rescue assistance." Lisa looked up from her navigation station. "Titan 4 is 12 hours away at maximum speed. We could be there before any other ships." "What about the Council rescue fleet?" Jake asked. Tony checked his communications. "The Xenthari rescue fleet is 18 hours away. Gorvac emergency response team is 24 hours out. Even the Velkran fast response ships are 15 hours away." Jake stared at the emergency message on the screen. 10,000 people were going to die if someone did not help them soon. The New Horizon was small and old, but it was also the closest ship to the colony. Ben's voice came from the engineering station. "Captain, our ship is not designed for emergency rescue operations. We don't have the equipment or the space for thousands of refugees." "I know," Jake said quietly. "But we might be the only chance they have. Amy stood up from her medical station. Those people need help now. We can't wait for someone else to save them. Jake looked around at his crew. They were just 5 humans. On an old ship that most aliens thought was barely capable of carrying cargo. The New Horizon dropped out of hyperspace near Titan IV, and Jake Morrison immediately saw why the colony was in trouble. The planet was wrapped in a violent storm of solar energy that made it look like a ball of angry lightning. Waves of radiation pulsed outward from the storm, strong enough to kill anyone who got too close. "My God," Lisa Park whispered from her navigation station. "I've never seen anything like this." The storm covered the entire planet in sheets of electric fire. Solar radiation was pouring down like invisible rain, and every few seconds huge bolts of energy would crack across the sky. The colony's distress beacon was weak and getting weaker as the storm destroyed their communication equipment, piece by piece. "Tony, can you reach them?" Jake asked. Tony Blake worked frantically at his communication controls. "I'm getting bits and pieces, Captain. Their main shield generator's down to 30% power. They estimate 6 hours before complete failure. After that, he did not need to finish." Everyone knew what happened when 10,000 people were exposed to that much radiation. "Ben, how close can we get?" Jake called to the engineering station. Ben Carter studied his instruments with a worried expression. "The radiation levels are off the charts, Captain. If we get within 50,000 kilometers, our shields will start failing. Any closer than that and we'll be cooked." Before Jake could respond, space around them filled with new ships. The Zenthari rescue fleet had arrived early, led by Commander Zeknal and his flagship. The Zenthari ships were beautiful and deadly, shaped like silver daggers, with technology that humans could barely understand. "Human vessel, this is Commander Zeknal," came a cold voice over their communications. "You will withdraw immediately. This rescue operation is beyond your capabilities." Jake gritted his teeth, but tried to stay polite. Commander, we were first on scene. Maybe we can help." "Your assistance is not required or desired," Zeknal replied. "Move to a safe distance and observe how a proper rescue is conducted." The Zenthari ships moved toward the storm with military precision. Their advanced shields glowed bright blue as they pushed through the outer layers of radiation. But as they got closer to the planet, their perfect formation began to break apart. The storm was too chaotic for their computers to predict, and their shields could not adapt fast enough to the changing energy patterns. "This is impossible," came Zeknal's voice, now strained with effort. "The storm's behavior is completely random. Our calculations show no viable approach vector." Jake watched as the Zenthari ships were forced to retreat, their superior technology useless against the wild storm.
Ow.
But before he could think of what to do next, more ships arrived. The Gorvak had sent a rescue fleet led by War Chief Morgul. The Gorvak ships were nothing like the elegant Zenthari vessels. They looked like flying mountains made of metal and armed with enough weapons to destroy planets. Morgul's approach was simple and direct. "Zenthari weaklings cannot handle a little storm," Morgul announced over open communications. "Gorvak will show how real warriors solve problems." The Gorvak ships charged straight into the storm like angry bulls, their massive hulls and powerful engines pushed through the radiation that had stopped the Zenthari. For a moment, it looked like brute force would succeed where intelligence had failed. But the Gorvak ships were too big and too slow. When the storm's energy patterns shifted, they could not change course fast enough. One by one, they were forced to retreat as the radiation began cooking their crews inside their own ships. "Gorvak vessels are withdrawing," Morgul admitted, his pride clearly wounded. "The storm is too unpredictable for direct assault." The Velkrin arrived next, with ships that looked more like floating cities than rescue vessels. Their leader, Techmaster Velkar, immediately began deploying advanced equipment that humans had never seen before. "Primitive species lack patience," Velkar announced. "Velkrin technology will solve this problem through superior engineering." The Velkrin sent dozens of robot probes into the storm, each one designed to map the energy patterns and find a safe path to the planet. Their computers worked faster than any human mind could follow, processing millions of calculations every second. but the storm seemed to sense what they were doing. Every time the probes found a pattern, the storm changed. Every time they calculated a safe path, the energy shifted to block it. One by one, the expensive probes were destroyed by the very storm they were trying to understand. Technology malfunction, Velkar finally admitted. Storm interference is beyond current parameters. Jake looked around at his small crew. 3 of the galaxy's most advanced species had failed to rescue the colonists. The Zenthari were too rigid, the Gorvak too crude, and the Velkrin too dependent on their machines. Meanwhile, 10,000 people were slowly dying on the planet below. Ben, Jake said quietly, you've been studying that storm. What do you see? Ben had been working at his engineering station the whole time, ignoring the alien rescue attempts. Captain, this is going to sound crazy, but that storm reminds me of something from Earth. What do you mean? Back home, we get aurora storms when solar particles hit our magnetic field. The patterns look random, but there's actually a rhythm. To them, like music that's almost too complex to hear. Ben pointed at his readings. This storm has the same kind of rhythm. It's not truly random, it's just more complicated than their computers can handle. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her medical station. There's something else, Captain. I've been checking our crew's radiation exposure levels. We're handling this much better than we should be. What do you mean? Earth has a weaker magnetic field than most planets with intelligent life. We've been exposed to more background radiation our whole lives. Our bodies are naturally more resistant to it than other species. Amy's eyes were bright with understanding. We might be able to get closer to the planet than anyone else, Lisa was already working on her navigation computer. If Ben is right about the storm patterns, I might be able to plot a course through it, not with computers, but by feel, like sailing through a hurricane back on Earth. Tony nodded from his communication station, and if we can get close enough, I can boost our signal strength to coordinate with the colony directly. Jake felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Not the kind of hope that came from having better technology or stronger weapons, but the kind that came from understanding something that others had missed. Commander Zeknal, Jake called. Over the communications, we request permission to attempt a rescue. Human Captain, your vessel is unsuitable for this operation. Your technology is primitive, and your crew lacks experience. Maybe, Jake replied, but we have something else. Oh. And what is that? Jake looked around at his crew, these 5 humans who had been dismissed and overlooked by the entire galaxy. We have experience with impossible situations. Without waiting for permission, Jake gave the order. Lisa, take us in. Ben, route all power to shields and life support. Amy, monitor radiation levels for the whole crew. Tony, try to reach the colony as soon as we're in range. The New Horizon turned toward the storm. As they approached the outer edge, the ship began to shake from the radiation impact. Warning alarms started going off, but Ben quickly shut them down. We know it's dangerous, he muttered. We don't need the computer to tell us. Lisa's hands moved over her controls like she was playing piano. She could not see the storm patterns the way a computer would, but she could feel them. Every human pilot learned to fly by instinct because human ships were not advanced enough to do everything automatically. There, she said, pointing at her screen. The storm pulses every 47 seconds, but there's a smaller pulse every 12 seconds. If we time it right, we can ride the energy wave instead of fighting it. Are you sure? Jake asked. Lisa smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her in months. Captain, I've been flying through asteroid fields and solar storms since I was 20. This is just a bigger storm. The New Horizon dove into the energy maelstrom. The ship bucked and rolled as waves of radiation hammered their shields. But instead of trying to push through like the other ships had done, Lisa let the storm carry them. She used the energy pulses to boost their speed and change direction, surfing the solar winds like an expert sailor riding ocean waves. Incredible, came Zeknal's voice over the communications. The human ship is actually gaining speed inside the storm. Ben was working miracles in the engine room, rerouting power and adjusting systems faster than any computer could manage. When their primary shield generator overloaded, he switched to backup power. When the backup failed, he jury-rigged a third system using spare parts and pure determination. "Ben, how are we still alive?" Amy called out as the ship shook around. I honestly don't know," Ben replied. "I'm using systems in ways they were never designed for. This should be impossible." But it was working. The New Horizon was diving deeper into the storm than any of the advanced alien ships had managed. The radiation levels were incredible, but Amy was right about human resistance. Their crew was handling exposure that would have killed most other species. "Tony, are you getting anything from the colony?" Jake asked. Tony was sweating as he worked his controls. "Coming in now, Captain. Colony leader is someone named Frank Cooper. He says their main shield will fail in 3 hours. They have emergency shelt." The New Horizon landed on Titan 4, just as the colony's main shield generator began sparking and smoking. Jake Morrison and his crew ran through corridors filled with frightened colonists from a dozen different species. Xanthari children clung to their parents with their large black eyes wide with fear. Gorvac families huddled together, their thick skin already showing signs of radiation burns. Velcrin scientists worked frantically on their broken equipment while Zelian diplomats tried to keep everyone calm. Frank Cooper, the human colony leader, met them at the main power station. He was a big man with gray hair and hands that shook from exhaustion. "Thank God you're here," he said. "I thought the council ships would come first." "They tried," Jake replied. "The storm was too much for them. How long do we have?" 2 hours. "Maybe less," Frank said, leading them to the shield generator. "This thing is 50 years old and held together with spare parts. When it fails, we're all dead." Ben Carter looked at the massive machine and whistled softly. "This is Velcrin technology, but someone's been fixing it with human parts." He knelt down and opened an access panel. "Frank, who's been maintaining this thing?" "Me and my team. We haven't had a real Velcrin engineer here in 10 years. Council says we're not important enough." Frank's voice was bitter. "So we learned to fix it ourselves." Ben smiled for the first time in days. "Good thing you did. I can work with this." While Ben dove into the generator's guts, Amy Rodriguez set up a medical station in the colony's main hall. She had colonists lined up for radiation treatment, but she quickly realized something strange was happening.
"Ash, Jake,"
she called over her communicator. "You need to see this." Jake found Amy treating a young Xanthari who should have been dying from radiation exposure. Instead, the child was sitting up and talking to her parents. "The humans gave me medicine," the child said in perfect English. "It made the burning stop." Amy pulled Jake aside. "The radiation treatment I'm using is designed for humans. It shouldn't work on other species, but it's helping everyone. Not just helping, it's working better than their own species-specific treatments. That doesn't make sense, I know, but look at the results." Amy showed him her medical scanner. Xanthari, Gorvac, Velcrin, they're all responding to human medical techniques. It's like our treatments are more universal than anyone thought. Meanwhile, Tony Blake was in the colony's communication center, trying to coordinate with the rescue ship still orbiting outside the storm. But he was also doing something else. He was talking to representatives from different species, and somehow he was getting them to work together. "Listen, Counselor Zeknal," Tony said into his communicator. "I know Xanthari and Gorvac don't usually cooperate, but right now we need War Chief Morgul's transport ships positioned at coordinates I'm sending you. Can you work with him for just a few hours?" There was a long pause. "Human Blake, the Gorvac, are crude and violent. Xanthari, do not lower ourselves to their level. Sir, with respect, 10,000 people are about to die. Maybe being crude and violent isn't the worst thing right now if it saves lives." Another pause. "You are suggesting we abandon our principles?" "I'm suggesting you expand them," Tony replied. "Xanthari are brilliant at strategy. Gorvac are excellent at transport. What if brilliant strategy guided excellent transport? Wouldn't that be better than either one alone?" Jake listened to this conversation with growing amazement. Tony was doing something that Zelian diplomats trained for years to accomplish. He was getting proud alien species to work together by appealing to their strengths, instead of pointing out their weaknesses. Lisa Park was in the colony's navigation center, working with local pilots to coordinate evacuation routes. But she was doing more than just plotting courses. She was teaching them to fly differently. The storm patterns are tricky, she explained to a nervous Velcrin pilot. Your computer wants to calculate the perfect path, but the storm keeps changing. Try feeling your way through instead. Feel my way through, the Velcrin asked. That is not logical. Maybe not, but it works. Watch. Lisa showed him on the simulator how to ride the energy waves instead of fighting them. Don't think about where the storm will be. Think about where it wants to go, then go with it. The Velcrin pilot tried Lisa's technique and successfully navigated through a storm pattern that destroyed 3 of his probes. This is impossible, he said. My training says this should not work. Your training is right, Lisa replied. Shouldn't work. But sometimes impossible things work anyway. 3 hours later, the impossible had happened. Ben had somehow gotten the ancient shield generator working better than it had in years. Amy had treated over 1,000 colonists with human medicine that worked on every species. Tony had convinced 6 different rescue fleets to work together in perfect coordination. Lisa had taught alien pilots to fly through storms that their computers said were impassable, but the real miracle was still happening. Every colonist on Titan IV was alive. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly with alien ships working together, like they never had before. News of the Titan for rescue spread through the galaxy faster than hyperspace travel. At first, the reactions were exactly what Jake expected. Pure luck, declared Counselor Vexdal in an official statement. The humans stumbled into a solution that more advanced species would have found eventually. A fluke, agreed War Chief Morgul. Gorvak ships could have done the same thing with more time. Insufficient data, stated Techmaster Velkar. Equipment would have succeeded with proper preparation. But other voices began to speak up. Dr. Sarah Kim was a human scientist working at the research. Station Olympus 12. She had been studying the rescue data with her colleague, Dr. Matt Johnson. And what they found was troubling the established powers of the galaxy. This wasn't luck, Sarah told the station director during a research meeting. Look at the data. The humans succeeded because they approached the problem completely differently than any other species would. Dr. Matt Johnson pulled up holographic displays showing the rescue operation. Every other species tried to solve the problem using their greatest strength. Zenthari used pure intelligence, Gorvak used brute force, Velcrin used advanced technology. All failed. The humans used something else, Sarah continued. They combined intelligence with intuition, technology with improvisation, individual skill with team cooperation. They didn't try to overpower the problem. They adapted to it. Word of their research reached other scientists throughout the galaxy. More incidents began to be reported and analyzed. Human merchant Captain Rick Torres had resolved a trade dispute between Zillion and Nordani companies that had been deadlocked for months. He did it by suggesting a solution that neither species had considered because it required both logical thinking and emotional understanding. Human scientist Dr. Grace Wong had solved a Velcrin engineering problem that their best minds had been working on for years. Her solution was elegant and simple, but it required what she called chaotic engineering, deliberately introducing controlled randomness that Velcrin computers could not handle. Each incident followed the same pattern. Humans succeeded where specialists failed because they were generalists. They could think like Zenthari when needed, fight like Gorvak when necessary, build like Velcrin when required, understand emotions like Nordani when helpful, and negotiate like Zillion when appropriate. But they could also do something no other species could do. They could combine all these approaches at the same time. The breakthrough came when Dr. Sarah Kim was reviewing ancient database archives for her research. She was looking for historical records of similar rescue operations when she stumbled across something that should not have existed. Matt, come look at this, she called to her colleague. The database was called the Keeper Archives, and it had been sealed for thousands of years. No one knew who created it or why it had been locked away. Scholars had tried to access it for centuries without success. But when Sarah entered her research, Data about human problem-solving abilities, the archive suddenly came alive. Lights began flashing, ancient computers started humming, and text began appearing on screens that had been dark since before any current species had reached the stars. "Matt, it's responding to human genetic markers," Sarah said in amazement. "The archive is scanning me." The text that appeared was in an ancient language that predated all known civilizations. But somehow, Sarah could understand it. The words seemed to write themselves directly into her mind. Species identification confirmed, generalist genome detected, inheritor criteria satisfied, archive access granted. What Sarah found in the Keeper archives changed everything. The database contained the history of the galaxy going back millions of years. It told the story of dozens of civilizations that had risen and fallen, always following the same pattern. Each species would develop one particular strength to an incredible degree. They would become the best in the galaxy at one thing, whether it was intelligence, strength, technology, psychic power, or diplomacy. But in becoming specialists, they lost the ability to adapt and grow. The archive spoke of something called the synthesis principle. True advancement required a species that could combine all abilities instead of perfecting just one. The galaxy had been waiting for millions of years for such a species to evolve. The inheritors will be. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in 50 years. Representatives from every species filled the great chamber on the neutral station of Harmony Prime. But instead of their usual orderly discussions, the chamber buzzed with angry voices and fearful whispers. Jake Morrison stood in the witness section with his crew, still wearing their old uniforms from the New Horizon. 3 weeks had passed since the Titan IV rescue, and their lives had been turned upside down. They were no longer just another cargo crew. They were symbols of something that scared the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The Keeper archives are clearly malfunctioning, declared Counselor Vexthal from the Zenthari delegation. His black eyes swept across the chamber like searchlights. No species can suddenly become superior to those who have led the galaxy for thousands of years. War Chief Morgul pounded his massive fist on his delegation's table. Gorvak agreed with Zenthari for once. Humans are weak. This archive nonsense is impossible, but not everyone agreed. Representative Kelnar of the Fulani spoke up from the smaller species section. The Fulani were traders who had been pushed around by larger species for centuries. Maybe the archives are right. Maybe being strongest or smartest isn't the only way to lead. Silence commanded Prime Counselor Hextall, a Zelian whose blue skin had turned almost purple with stress. "We will have order in this chamber." Jake watched as the council split into two groups. The established powers, led by the Zenthari, formed what they called the Stability Coalition. They wanted humans contained and controlled. The smaller species, who had been ignored for decades, began looking to humanity with something Jake had never seen before. Hope. Ambassador Helen Wright stood to address the council. She had been recalled from her diplomatic mission and looked tired but determined. "Honored counselors, humanity requests permission to access more of the Keeper archives. If we are truly these inheritors, shouldn't we understand what that means?" "Absolutely not," Vexel replied immediately. "Humans have already caused enough disruption. Further access could destabilize the entire galactic order." "Maybe the galactic order needs to be destabilized," came a voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to see Dr. Sarah Kim walking down the center aisle, followed by Dr. Matt Johnson and a dozen other human scientists. Dr. Kim, Prime Counselor Hextall said coldly, "You were not given permission to speak." "The archives gave me permission," Sarah replied, stopping in front of the main podium. "They gave me information that everyone in this chamber needs to hear." Sarah activated a holographic projector that filled the air above the council chamber. With images from deep space, the images showed something that made even the bravest warriors step back in fear. Massive ships, each one larger than an entire space station, moving through the darkness between galaxies. "The Devourers are real," Sarah announced. "And according to the archives, they'll reach our galaxy in less than 5 years." "Then the chamber erupted in chaos. Counselors shouted questions and accusations while their translators struggled to keep up. Security guards moved to restore order, but even they seemed shaken by what they had seen. "This is obviously fake," Vexel declared. "Humans are using fear tactics to gain power." Dr. Matt Johnson stepped forward. "Long-range sensor data is available for anyone to verify. Check the Galactic Rim observatories. The signals are already there if you know what to look for." Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what this meant. The rescue at Titan IV had not just saved 10,000 lives, it had revealed humanity's role in a much larger crisis that threatened every living being in the galaxy. President Laura Henderson of Earth arrived at Harmony Prime 3 days later with a small fleet of human ships. Jake was surprised to see that the president was a woman in her 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes that reminded him of his grandmother. She did not look like someone who was supposed to save the galaxy. "Captain Morrison," President Henderson said as they met in the station's conference room, "I understand we have you and your crew to thank for starting this whole situation." "I'm sorry, Madam President. We're just trying to help." "Don't apologize, Captain. You've given humanity the chance we've been waiting for our entire history." She turned to look out the window at the alien ships gathered around the station. "The question is, what do we do with that chance?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Director Kevin Walsh of the newly formed Department of Galactic Affairs entered the room with a proposal that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. "We're forming a special mission team," Walsh announced. He was a tall man with sharp eyes who had spent years studying alien cultures. "Captain Morrison, we want you to lead humanity's first official diplomatic mission to unlock the remaining Keeper archives." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "Sir, I'm just a cargo ship captain. I don't know anything about diplomacy or ancient archives. You know something more important?" President Henderson said. "You know how to bring out the best in people when everything seems hopeless. That's what we need right now." The mission team included the humans who had been making waves throughout the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Kim would handle the scientific aspects of the archives. Captain Rick Torres would manage relations with alien allies. Dr. Grace Wong would work on combining human and alien technologies. Ambassador Helen Wright would handle formal diplomacy, but they were not going alone. The mission had attracted volunteers from other species, including Vecburo, a young Gorvac warrior who had been inspired by human courage during the Titan IV rescue. "Humans showed that strength is not just about muscle," Vecburo explained in his deep voice. "Gorvac want to learn this new kind of strength." As Jake's team accessed deeper levels of the Keeper archives, the truth about the galaxy's situation became clearer and more frightening. The archives revealed that galactic civilization had been slowly dying for thousands of years without anyone realizing it. "Look at this data," Dr. Sarah Kim said as she projected historical records. "For the past 5,000 years, there have been no major technological breakthroughs, no new forms of art, no philosophical advances. Every species has become so specialized that they've stopped growing." The archives showed civilization after civilization that had followed the same pattern. The Zenthari had become so focused on pure logic that they could no longer think creatively. Gorvac had developed such physical power that they had forgotten how to adapt. The Velcrin had built such perfect machines that they no longer knew how to innovate. "It's like the entire galaxy has been stuck in the same place for millennia," Dr. Matt Johnson observed. "Everyone became so good at one thing that they forgot how to do anything else." But humans were different. Having evolved in isolation on Earth, they had never been forced to specialize. They remained generalists by necessity, maintaining abilities that other species had abandoned long ago. "The archives call it the synthesis principle," Sarah explained to the team. "True progress requires combining different approaches, not perfecting single ones. Logic with intuition, strength with flexibility, technology with wisdom." The most disturbing revelation came when they accessed the military records. The archives contained detailed information about the Devourers, an extragalactic species that had consumed dozens of galaxies over millions of years. "They're not evil," Dr. Grace Wong said as she studied the tactical data. "They're just completely uniform. Hive mind that thinks and acts exactly the same way every time." They've conquered galaxy after galaxy because their enemies were all specialists who couldn't adapt to new threats. The Devourers had a simple but effective strategy. They would study their target galaxy, identify the dominant species, and their specializations then develop specific counters for each one. Intelligent species would be overwhelmed with chaos. Strong species would be outmaneuvered. Technological species would face weapons they could not understand. But they've never faced a generalist species, Jake realized. They don't know how to counter something that keeps changing and adapting. As word of the Devourer threat spread throughout the galaxy, the political situation began to shift. Some members of the Stability Coalition started having second thoughts about containing humanity. Others dug in deeper, convinced that maintaining the current order is the only way to survive. The turning point came when the archives revealed the most crucial piece of information. The Devourers were not just coming to the galaxy randomly. They had been drawn here by signals that the galaxy was ripe for consumption. Signals that came from the stagnation of specialized civilizations. "We've been broadcasting our weakness for thousands of years," Sarah announced to an emergency council session. "Every time we refused to change, every time we insisted that our way was the only way, we sent a message that we were ready to be harvested." The solution was as simple as it was terrifying. The galaxy needed to unite under leadership that could adapt and inspire others to adapt. Leadership that could combine the best of all species into something greater than any single specialization. "Our shays are clear," Ambassador Helen Wright told the assembled counselors. "Either the galaxy learns to work together under human guidance, or it faces extinction when the Devourers arrive." The vote was closer than anyone expected. The Stability COA. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned flagship Harmony, watching the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history prepare for battle. 5 years had passed since the Galactic Council voted to accept human leadership, and those years had changed everything. The ship around him was a miracle of cooperation. Xanthari computers guided Gorvac engines, while Velcrum weapons were powered by Nordani psychic amplifiers. Human engineers like Ben Carter had learned to combine all these technologies in ways that no single species could have imagined. "Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting the Devourer advance fleet," reported Captain Lisa Park from her position at the navigation station. She wore the blue uniform of the Galactic Defense Force now, with stars on her collar that marked her as one of the highest-ranking officers in the fleet. Jake nodded grimly. "How many ships?" 50,000 in the first wave alone," Lisa replied. "Each one is twice the size of our largest battleships." The past 5 years had not been easy. Stability Coalition had fought human leadership every step of the way. Sometimes with politics and sometimes with violence. 3 separate rebellions had tried to overthrow the new order, led by species who would rather face extinction than follow human commands. Jake had been forced to make decisions that still haunted him. When the Xanthari purist movement had seized control of their home system and refused to cooperate with the defense preparations, he had ordered a blockade that cut them off from galactic trade. When Gorvac traditionalists had sabotaged weapons factories, he had authorized raids by joint human-alien teams that captured the saboteurs. Each victory had come at a cost. Each time humans proved they could lead, some aliens grew more resentful. But each time aliens worked together under human guidance, others began to see the possibilities of true cooperation. Admiral Morrison to all fleet commanders, Jake spoke into his communication system. "This is what we've been preparing for. Remember your training. Trust your crews. Show the Devourers what happens when free beings work together." The Devourer. Ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the galaxy like a swarm of metal insects. They were perfect geometric shapes, with no wasted movement or decorative elements. Each ship was identical to every other ship, built by a hive mind that had never learned the value of individual creativity. "Devourer fleet is moving in standard formation 77 Alpha, reported Commander Tony Blake from the intelligence station. He had grown into one of the best tactical analysts in the fleet, able to predict enemy movements by understanding their rigid thinking patterns. "They're not adapting to our defensive positions. That's their weakness," said Dr. Grace. Wong, from her position at the weapons control station, She had spent 5 years developing hybrid technologies that combined the best ideas from every species. They can't change their plans once they've started. But Jake knew the battle would not be easy. The Devourers had overwhelming numbers and technology that was thousands of years more advanced than anything the galaxy possessed. Their only advantage was the one thing the enemy could not understand: the ability to adapt and improvise. "All ships, execute pattern chaos," Jake ordered. The galactic fleet broke apart into dozens of smaller groups, each one moving independently. There was no single formation for the Devourers to target, no predictable strategy for them to counter. Instead, each group attacked differently, forcing the enemy to face tactics they had never encountered. Captain Rick Torres led a squadron of fast attack ships and hit-and-run strikes that appeared random but were actually carefully coordinated. Dr. Sarah Kim commanded a group of science vessels that used modified mining equipment as weapons, turning everyday tools into instruments of war. The first battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the destruction of the Devourer advance fleet. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. The main enemy force was still coming, and it would be 10 times larger than what they had just faced. "Casualties?" Jake asked, as the surviving ships regrouped. "Lighter than expected," reported Dr. Amy Rodriguez from the medical station. She had become the chief medical officer for the entire galactic fleet. "The enemy was so focused on our larger ships that they ignored our smaller ones until it was too late." But the real test came 3 months later when the main Devourer fleet arrived. 5 million ships filled the space at the galaxy's edge, each one bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. Their formations were perfect, their movements synchronized with mechanical precision. "They've adapted to our chaos tactics," Commander Tony Blake observed as he studied the enemy fleet. "They're using different formations now, ones designed to handle unpredictable attacks." Jake felt a chill of fear. The Devourers were learning, just as the archives had warned. Their hive mind was analyzing every battle and developing counters. "For human creativity, then we need to be more creative," Jake said quietly. The solution came from an unexpected source. Thekburo, the young Gorvak warrior who had joined the human mission years earlier, approached Jake with an idea that seemed completely insane. "Admiral, what if we don't fight them at all?" Thekburo suggested. "What do you mean? Devourers expect resistance. They've conquered dozens of galaxies by overwhelming organized defenses. But what if there was no defense to overwhelm?" Jake stared at the young alien who had learned to think like a human. "You're suggesting we let them into the galaxy? Not let them in?" Thekburo replied with a grin that showed his massive teeth. "Invite them in, then show them something they've never seen before." The plan that emerged from that conversation was the most audacious gambit in galactic history. Instead of meeting the Devourers at the galaxy's edge, the combined fleet would retreat and let the enemy advance. But they would not retreat randomly. They would fall back in a pattern that would draw the Devourers toward the galactic core, where a surprise was waiting. "This is madness," declared Counselor Vextal during the emergency strategy meeting. "You're giving them exactly what they want." "No," Jake replied. "We're giving them what they expect." "There's a difference." For 6 months, the galactic fleet conducted a fighting retreat toward the center of the galaxy. They made the Devourers work for every star system, but they always fell back before the enemy could achieve total victory. To the hive mind, it looked like a typical conquest proceeding exactly as planned. But while the Devourers focused on their advance, something extraordinary was happening behind them. Species that had fought each other for thousands of years were working together in ways that had never been attempted. Zenthari scientists were teaching Gorvak engineers. Velkran artists were collaborating with Nordani philosophers. Zillion diplomats were learning from human merchants. They're not just building weapons, Dr. Sarah Kim reported from her research station. They're building a new kind of civilization. The trap was sprung at the galactic core, where the ancient Keeper archives were located. As the Devourer fleet approached what they thought was the final stronghold of galactic resistance, they found something that their hive mind could not process. Instead of a desperate last stand, they found a celebration. Millions of ships from Hundreds of species were gathered around the galactic core, but they were not in battle formation. They were in festival formation, with lights and music and displays of art from every corner of the galaxy. What are they doing? The devourer hive mind broadcast in confusion. This was the first time in recorded history that they had been forced to ask a question. "We're showing you what you're trying to destroy," Jake replied over open communications. "Look around you. See what free beings can create when they work together." For the first time in their existence, the devourers hesitated. Their hive mind was designed to consume static civilizations, not dynamic ones. They did not know how to process a galaxy that was actively changing and growing. That hesitation was all the opening the galactic fleet needed. The festival formation suddenly transformed into the most complex battle strategy ever attempted. Every ship became part of a larger whole. But unlike the devourer hive mind, each crew maintained their individual creativity and decision-making ability. The result was chaos that looked like art, destruction that felt like creation. The devourers found themselves fighting an enemy that changed faster than they could adapt, that turned every defeat into a new kind of victory. "They're retreating," Lisa Park announced with amazement. "The devourer fleet is actually retreating." But the real victory was not the battle itself, it was what came after. As the devourer ships fled back toward the darkness between galaxies, the species of the galaxy found that they did not want to return to their old ways of isolation and competition. "We did this together," Dekbro observed as he stood on the bridge of the Harmony, looking out at the mixed crews that now served on every ship. Huma, Zenthari, Gorvak, Velkrin, all of us. "We're stronger together than any of us ever were alone." Jake nodded as he watched construction crews beginning work on a new space station at the galactic core. The new galactic capital would be built by every species working together, a symbol of the unity that had saved them all. Admiral Dr. Sarah Kim approached him with a data tablet. The archives have been updating themselves. They're recording everything that's happened. "What do they say about humanity's role now?" Sarah smiled.